With just 14 days until voters get their say, President Trump is letting it fly at his rallies and really whenever microphones are present. This week, he pledged a 10% tax cut for the middle class between now and the midterms. But Congress is out of town. That's not going to happen. After repeatedly charging there are Middle Easterners sprinkled into the caravan migrant group, today he admitted he has no proof. His vice president is using a false figure about terrorists trying to come here from Mexico. Trump continues to go heavy on the idea of a Democratic mob. Fox News devoted more airtime just tonight to the idea of mob rule. The president has changed job numbers on the fly this week. He has let wild charges fly. Here now a sampling.
The Democrats want to replace freedom with socialism. The Democrats have become an angry, unhinged mob. You know what I am? I'm a nationalist, okay? I'm a nationalist. I don't think we like sanctuary cities up here. By the way, a lot of people in California don't want them either. They're rioting now. Any guy that can do a body slam, he's my kind of... He's my guy. Maxine Waters. Good old Maxine. Low IQ individual. Low IQ. I'm willing to send the military to defend our southern border if necessary. All caused because of the illegal immigration onslaught brought by the Democrats because they refuse to acknowledge or to change the laws. They like it. They also figure everybody coming in is going to vote Democrat.
With us tonight to talk about all of it, Ashley Parker, Pulitzer Prize-winning White House reporter for The Washington Post, and Sabrina Siddiqui is back with us, political reporter for The Guardian. Sabrina, who among us doesn't like a good sweeping generalization? So let's start with one. The closing argument in 2016 was, don't vote for Hillary Clinton. She's a straight-up criminal. If you do, we'll have nonstop investigations at the start of her presidency. The closing argument 2018 seems to be, they're coming for you. They're coming for your house, your flat screen TV, your family, and for good measure, there are Middle Easterners embedded within the crowds. Do we have that about right?
Well, that appears to be the closing argument, both from the president as well as, frankly, Republicans on the ballot who have been running very sharply anti-immigrant political ads on TV. And so there certainly is this embrace by the GOP of the politics of fear. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that the Republicans were supposed to run on tax cuts, on what was the president's singular legislative accomplishment since taking office. But polling has found that the tax bill that the president signed into law last year is increasingly unpopular with the American public. In fact, the Republican National Committee's own internally commissioned survey found that respondents by a 2-to-1 margin felt that the bill disproportionately benefited wealthy Americans and corporations over the middle class. So what the president is doing is he's operating off the same playbook he used in 2016 by instead trying to turn out the Republican base by appealing to his most ardent supporters, and that has to do with stoking fears around immigrants, inflaming racial tensions. Will it work? Well, that depends on whether or not these midterms are a referendum on his presidency or simply a question of which party is able to turn out its base in larger numbers.
Ashley, I swear I'm coming to you, but first I'm going to do one of my favorite things, and that is to read your writing aloud dramatically. One of the promises the president made this week was a 10% middle-class tax cut, even though Congress is nowhere close to Washington. It can't be done. You write, the mystery tax cut is only the latest instance of the federal government scrambling to reverse engineer policies to meet Trump's sudden public promises or to search for evidence buttressing his conspiracy theories and falsehoods. The Pentagon leaped into action to both hold a military parade and launch a space force on the president's whims. Commerce Department moved to create a plan for auto tariffs after Trump angrily threatened to impose them. Just this week, Vice President Pence, the Department of Homeland Security, and the White House all rushed to try to back up Trump's unsupported claim that unknown Middle Easterners, the worst kind, were part of a migrant caravan in Central America, only to have the president admit late Tuesday there was no proof at all. Quickly, let's view that exchange in the Oval Office, then we'll talk to the journalist.
And I spoke to him literally last night. I spoke to another one this morning. Very good relationship with Border Patrol and ICE. And they say it happens all the time from the Middle East. It's not even saying bad or good, but some real bad ones. But they intercept.
No proof that they're in the caravan now.
They could very well be.
But there's no proof.
There's no proof of anything. There's no proof of anything. But they could very well be.
So, Ashley Parker, is the subhead of your story that shiny objects will always be shiny objects? When you are the head of government, there are so many people beneath you that some of them can sound like orders and initiatives.
They sure can. And when you're the head of government, you can turn your whims and your desires and your offhand comments and your tweets into oftentimes reality. What we get into in our story is, in some examples, if you just take two from this week, the president sort of says something that is not rooted in truth, like his claim about the caravans, for which he has been able to provide no evidence. But it sends the rest of the administration scrambling to come up with justifications and examples. And it's worth noting, it also leaves them and their credibility hanging out to dry after they've all gone out publicly. The White House press secretary, the vice president vouch for the president. And then he says, as you just showed in the Oval Office, well, actually, you know, you're right. There is no proof, but it could be true. The flip side of that is when you're the president, again, you can have a whim or you can have a desire, like you would like to do a tax cut, and then government sort of mobilizes around you to try to make it happen. Now, of course, what the president first said, a tax cut before the midterms, is simply not feasible. But Trump did sort of come up with this tax cut seemingly out of the blue. No one in his administration knew about it. None of the key players on Capitol Hill who would have to be involved knew about it. But what you are now seeing in the background are lawmakers and aides working to try to make something that the president dreamed up happen. And that's the power of the presidency.
Sabrina, to your mind and in your reporting, any parallel for this, the depth and breadth of this prior to a midterm election on the part of a president?
Well, I certainly think that with this particular president, a lot of the rhetoric on immigration and just stoking of racial divisions is fairly unprecedented. But you think back to the 2014 election cycle, and there was a migrant crisis that President Obama had to deal with at the border of unaccompanied minors. And Republicans very much did try and run a campaign that similarly revolved around the politics of fear. There was also the Ebola crisis occurring simultaneously, and the rise of ISIS. So you did certainly have some similar themes play out, but those were more from the down-ballot candidates, of course, not coming from the presidency itself. I think that what's telling, though, is that if you look at a lot of these Republican ads that are so focused on linking immigrants to violent crime, even though that's not borne out by the statistics, it really does show the extent to which the party has gone to embrace what is known as Trumpism and this president's rhetoric and policy agenda when it comes to immigration. Now, again, it's designed for short-term gain to return out support from the Republican base. But there are some Republican operators I speak to who think this could have long-term effects on the party, especially when it comes to its outreach with Hispanic voters in future elections. That, of course, will be a conversation for another day.
So, Ashley, these West Wingers you talk to, let's take the fictional tax cut. Do they look at this, the pile of these things stacking up, and just think this is the life we've chosen?
I think there's a recognition that this is how this president operates. And they've often, since the very early days of this White House, had to, as we wrote, sort of reverse engineer policy or even facts to a certain extent to try to make what the president says happen or seem true. I will say one thing that in a way kind of helps them is that Trump has proven himself so far, at least, impervious to paying a penalty for his mistruths. So in some ways, you would see aides from another politician, if the president said something that wasn't true, absolutely scrambling, whereas these aides in the West Wing, they sort of shrug and are less bothered by it because they've learned that whether it's the president going out and mocking Dr. Blasey Ford or saying something not true about caravans, there is not necessarily a tremendous price he pays, at least with that core group of supporters in his base.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.